Hi, it's Mike Clevenger of Masons Lead Better, and this short presentation is another one in our Master Builder Education series. This one came about as I thought about a couple of weeks ago the change that's occurring in our lodges here in Ohio during this time of the year as new officers are elected and installed and take their positions to lead their lodge in the next Masonic year. And as I thought about change, I thought about my own situation. I'm quite excited that I've been asked to be my lodge's lodge education officer. And as I prepared for that position by reading our Grand Lodge's Lodge Education Manual, all that it entails, I began to put the two together, and I thought about organizational change. And then the more I read about our educational system we've put together, the more I believe that it is the basis for the change that you may be seeking in Lodge. So I've got a series of 4 or 5 slides here. I would like to pass on my thinking to you. And so this is about how your education program in your lodge, if conducted properly, will drive positive change and create some of that change that you sorely need in your lodge. And so as I thought about this, on the right-hand side, I pulled out a blank sheet of paper and I started sketching out on the left, the elements of Lodge Education Program. In the middle, some topics about leadership competency, because it will take competent leaders to deal with that third column of organizational change. So I'd like to walk you through my thinking as I outlined it on this blank sheet of paper. So my thought was the system of effective lodge education will create positive change. And positive change through the use of education will lead, as you see that arrow on the bottom, will lead to a culture in your lodge of learning and leadership. And it's been proven time and again that the most effective organizations are those that have a system of positive learning and are creating leaders at all levels. And when I speak of leaders, I mean not just titled leaders, but every member of the organization is leading in his own way using his own talents. So what I would like to do is walk you through my thinking as I outlined on this on this chart you see here. So let's first talk about change. And I've talked to a lot of, through the workshops, I've talked to a lot of lodge leaders about effective change and what they believe they need in their own lodge. But I think we can boil, for the purposes of this, let's just boil it down to some simple things that I think all of us would like to see in our lodges. So we dial in there on the organizational change column. What are we looking for? Well, we would like to have more members to showing up at our meetings. So we want more members attending, and certainly we want them coming back and coming back again. So when they get to lodge, we want a lodge experience that's worth their time, worth the sacrifice of that night away from their family, or making arrangements, in their work, that they may be at lodge meeting. And we want them, after that experience, to walk away with something of value. That may certainly be formal lodge education. It may be just something, a wonderful conversation that they had at a dinner. before or after your lodge meeting. So we want them to take something away for their time invested. We certainly want to create in our lodges an organization that men want to join. They see it as a group of men doing something, providing value for each other, and certainly helping to improve each other. So we want to project our organization as a valued place for a man to belong to. And finally, we all want an organization that contributes to others, that provides leaders for for your community, provides leaders for, say, the other organizations you may belong to. And certainly we want an organization that brings about relief to those who need help. And so if you think about these 5 statements, if these are common things we all want, these become our vision. This is what we're trying to accomplish by changing something in our lodge so that we can achieve more members coming. When they get there, they find an experience worth their time. They take away something that they can use, some value, some lesson that they can apply in other parts of their life. We want to attract new men to join our organization, and we certainly want to practice the Masonic tenet of relief and contribute to the welfare and value of others. So that's simply the change I'm talking about here as an example of organizational change. So let's switch to the other side of that chart and let's talk about the Lodge Education Program. Now, I'll be honest, until I completely read the materials, the Lodge Education Officer's Manual, I didn't really realize the extensiveness of lodge education. I think typically we think of lodge education as just that presentation the lodge educate LAO stands up and makes in lodge and considers that's all he does. But really it's much more deeper than that. So if we look at, after I read the Lodge Education Program here in Ohio, I broke it down into 3 parts. First part, apprentice counseling, and the creation and education of master craftsmen to guide and instruct and mentor those apprentices that are coming through the degrees. Certainly the investigation committee that is the first, maybe the first Masonic men that a petitioner will meet. So that's those men are very important because there is the first impression your lodge makes on that man who has filled out that petition. So that whole apprentice counseling piece, I think, is the bulk of where the work belongs and for the lodge education officer. And I just pulled out 80% of your time. Probably should be building and maintaining and making sure that program is running smoothly. Focusing on the proper education of Masons coming through your lodge. The second piece of that is certainly leadership development, current officers, and certainly developing future leaders. So it's important there is a expectation of a process that these officers that are elected or appointed, that they must go through, that your lodge expects them to be educated, not only in leadership, but in management type duties such as how to make out a budget, what are the rules and regulations by which the officers and the lodge should operate. So certainly a lodge education officer should be developing and making sure these programs are running in their lodge. And then that left about 5%, which goes back to that third piece, which are general lodge presentations. Those could be done by the LEO. Certainly, I saw, as I thought deeply about the apprentice counseling and the materials there for entered apprentices, fellowcraft, and master masons to study and questions to think about. These could make excellent lodge presentations just from that material alone. And certainly there are times that you bring in outside sources, say from the community, as a way to understand how your lodge may help in the community. So that's what I see the lodge education program looking like. I mentioned leadership, and the column you saw was leadership competency, and I've got 5 areas here that I think are extremely important. And I just want to briefly go through this, because certainly you need competent leaders that will lead your lodge. And here are some elements I think they should have qualities in all of these areas. First of all, I'm going to go all the way to the bottom and talk about legacy. And what does that mean? That means that brothers who understand that just being an officer and progressing through the chairs and becoming master and then going away and not contributing anymore is not leaving any type of legacy. So we want brothers who understand that lodge success depends upon them creating a lasting legacy. And one of the most important things you can do is mentor another Mason and walk alongside of him and teach him and making sure that he's aware of your lodge and all of the other things that make it run and make it successful. And so a leader, when he comes into a position, should look beyond just his years of service, and certainly as master more than just 1 year. He should look at what is he going to do to continually contribute to the success of his lodge. So legacy should be one of the first things on your mind when you become an officer. Now let's jump up at the top. Certainly an attitude that you lead with the attitude of a servant. You are there to help others, to clear the way, to help them reach their potential, to remove obstacles so that things for the lodge can get accomplished. And your attitude has to be one that my title doesn't make me a leader. My title just demands of me more responsibility as a leader. So we want open-minded leaders. We want certainly listeners. You have to be a great listener and understand what are the needs of your brother in your lodge, and what can your lodge do to fulfill those needs so they have a great lodge experience. The second thing, knowledge. You need brothers who are learners, who are motivated to learn, and they also understand their limitations so that they will dig in and learn some of the things they don't know, and build a base of understanding for the rules and regulations and the expectations of an officer in your lodge. And you do that by study. And you have to motivate yourself to individually do that. The next thing is relationships. You need brothers who understand that effective leaders create lasting, positive relationships with everyone they meet. Certainly those other officers on the officer team, and certainly all of the other brothers in lodge. A good leader is constantly seeking and listening to the needs and wants of the brothers in their lodge. And that's a very important part of leadership competency. And certainly the lodge education program, where we have master craftsmen and mentoring. A good leader will be one of those master craftsmen to guide and direct and instruct and mentor new Master Masons. And the whole section of mentoring itself is an area that, as an effective, competent leader, you need to understand what a mentor is and how you mentor someone else. You also should be understanding to the point of your own limitations and accept being mentored yourself, receiving positive and sometimes negative feedback on your performance and say, brother, I think you need to step it up here and there. So brothers who will mentor others, but brothers who will accept mentoring themselves. And we've already dealt with legacy. So you will need these competent leaders with these basic areas of competency to use your Lodge education program to move you to positive change. So let me try to tie all this together, and let's talk a little bit about organizational change. So this Lodge education system, if developed properly and operated in an efficient manner, is there to ensure continual leadership competency. There's an expectation that the Master Craftsman, the investigating committee, certainly the officers are all working to become competent leaders. Certainly those Lodge presentations to those brothers who have not assumed any leadership role certainly should be made to help develop them as well as leaders. So you get that whole learning leadership organization engine going, if you will. And when you have leadership competency, competent leaders understand how organizational change occurs. And let me take just a few minutes here and talk about organizational change and the 5 pieces of that. And first of all, you start out with an idea. And I've talked to a lot of brothers who have ideas about how they're going to change their lodge. Well, at that point, it's just your idea. And from your idea, you certainly can implement it. Wait to your master and say, by decree, I am the master, we're going to do this. But that really won't work for you. Here's what you need to do. You need to understand that all of your ideas for vision and change, what piece are you going to take on? Do you have the knowledge yourself to make your ideas happen? And if you don't, that should indicate to you that the next thing should happen. You should start building those positive relationships I talked about before. And certainly relationship with influencers. Who are influencers? Influencers are those guys that I've heard many, many times, well, we can't change anything on our lodge because the old past masters won't let us. Well, guess what? You haven't taken the time to build a positive, effective relationship with them. You have to understand where they came from, what knowledge they have, and you go at it by seeking their advice, not telling them what change you think is needed. You ask them to reflect on what has worked in your lodge before, and at the proper time, after you've built a relationship, then you can start to add in some of your thoughts and ask them what they think. This is a process. So you just can't come up with an idea and expect to implement it and expect it to go on. And so once you understand what you're going to do and what influencers, and you've got some of the lodge influencers understanding how valuable your idea for change may be, you go about figuring out who's going to make this happen, and you do that through mentoring. You learn who is effective at what, and you build effective complementary teams. men who can work together because one is more talented in an area than another, and that other brother can take charge of something that, say, the master is really not that competent in. So that's where the master understands his limitations, other officers understand their limitations, and effective teams are built. And finally, through this mentoring process and the proper education through apprentice counseling and continual knowledge building, you develop future leaders who will, once everyone is on board that this is a good thing for your lodge, whatever idea you may have, that you're developing future leaders who will continue to carry on this idea or ideas for improving your lodge, for building an effective education program, and why it's important. And if we go back to the middle three blocks there. So if you follow this process of organizational change, and by the way, this is not going to happen overnight. You've got to do this over time. Education becomes continual. It becomes what we always say, this is the way we do things around here. And guess what? That's your lodge culture. And once you build a culture of positive and effective apprentice counseling, you're building along the way master masons, you're identifying new master craftsmen, you're identifying men who can run parts of your events and programming for you, and it becomes part of your culture. You become known as a leadership education lodge. And that's how your lodge education program can drive organizational change, and why it's important to pay attention as the lodge education officer, as I came to find out. Man, this is an extensive job, and this is important to my lodge. So a system of education leads to leadership competency. Competent leaders have the ability to guide your lodge through meaningful change, and this education program, if planned for and carried out properly, will become your lodge culture. It'll become the way we do things around here. So a successful lodge is one where every brother is learning and every brother is a leader. And that is accomplished through a successful lodge education program. Well, those were my thoughts. And as the more I thought about it, the more I found out, I think I've taken on a big hunk of a job. And I'm looking forward to it because I'm looking forward to searching out those brothers who are willing to study, become those master craftsmen, become those mentors, and put my lodge on a program of, hey, let's become successful by putting together a system of education that provides value for our members when they come to a meeting, so they can walk away maybe learning something or building a new relationship with a new brother. That's what I had in mind today as I put this presentation together. I went a little longer than I expected, but I appreciate you listening, and I would welcome your thoughts at any time. Before I leave, I ask you a question. Whither are you and your lodge traveling? Is it the same old place? Are your meetings going to be the same? Are you going to grab hold of your education and start building something that will create a lasting legacy in a lodge that will last forever? Think about that. If I can ever help you, you know how to get me. MasonsLeadBetter.com. Mike at MasonsLeadBetter.com is the email address. I'd be glad to help you or your lodge find a way to improve what you already have. One last thing I'd like to tell you, if you would like to learn how to make masonry more meaningful to you, I have the Becoming Masonry program, which takes the tools and lessons of masonry and applies them and helps you build a system and an improvement for your life. And the Masonic Leaders Trust Board I talked about before is you learn how to build a lodge of purpose and meaning. And it's all about organizational change. So if you need more information on these programs, certainly email me, get in touch with me. I would be more than happy to help you. Well, that's what I have today. Thanks for listening. Hope to talk with you again. Bye.